It was sitting at the bottom of my mailbox, loose, with no envelope and no note. A small, broken half of a sand dollar, its edges worn smooth, and the moment my fingers closed around it, I knew three things at once, the way you sometimes know a whole story in a single object. I knew exactly who had sent it. I knew it meant she still loved me after 10 years of silence, and I knew, with a cold drop in my stomach, that she would only ever have sent it if she was dying. Let me tell you why a piece of a broken shell could do all that. My name is June. I am 42 years old, and I am a wedding photographer in Beaufort, South Carolina, down in the Lowcountry, where the marsh grass goes gold in the evening and the live oaks drip with Spanish moss. I make my living capturing the most important day of other people's lives. The held hands, the mother crying in the third row, the two people promising each other everything. It is a strange and beautiful job, and it has made me, I think, more sentimental than most about how short the time is and how easily people lose each other. Which makes it all the more shameful that I lost the most important person of my own life for 10 years, to nothing more than pride, and almost did not get her back. Her name was Della. We met when we were 6 years old, on the first day of first grade, and we were inseparable from that afternoon for the next 30 years. I do not have a single childhood memory that does not have Della somewhere in the frame. We grew up 3 streets apart, here in this town, 2 marsh kids running barefoot on the docks, and we did everything together, learned to swim together, got our hearts broken the same summer, were each other's maid of honor. People used to call us a single person with 2 bodies. She knew things about me no one else on earth knew. She was, in the truest sense of a word people use too lightly, my other half. To explain Della, I almost have to explain the place, because she was made of it. We grew up wild in a way kids do not get to be anymore. 2 girls turned loose in a salt marsh town with bikes and bare feet, and a curfew that was really just the sound of our mothers calling from 2 porches 3 streets apart. Della was the one who climbed higher, swam out farther, talked back to the boys who needed it. I was the watcher, the one who hung back and noticed things. Even then, I think I was a photographer, framing the world while Della went charging into it. We balanced each other exactly. She pulled me out of my shyness, and I pulled her back from her recklessness, and between us, we made one whole, sensible, brave person. Through every year of growing up, she was the first call and the last word, the keeper of every secret, the one who could tell which of my smiles was real. You do not get many people in a life who knew you before you became whoever you decided to be. Della knew me from the beginning. She knew the original. The sand dollar is from when we were 8. We found a perfect one on the beach at Hunting Island, a whole, unbroken sand dollar, and we wanted to each keep it. And of course, you cannot share a sand dollar, so Della, who was always the bold one, snapped it cleanly in 2 and gave me half and kept half and said, "There, now we each have part of the other one, so we can never really be apart." We were 8. We did not know we were making a vow that would outlive both of our certainties about everything else. I kept my half in a little dish on my dresser for 34 years. I still had it. And now, in my mailbox, was hers. And we did not drift in our 20s the way friends so often do. We stayed stitched together right through the years that scatter most people. The years of new cities and new husbands and new jobs. I shot her wedding before I ever did it for a living. It is still the best work I have ever done because I knew every face in that church and loved the woman in the white dress more than I have ever loved a client. She stood up at mine in a blue dress and cried so hard during my vows that she set me off too. We talked every single day, real conversations, not the thin maintenance texts that pass for friendship now. When my father died, she drove through the night to be on my doorstep by morning. When her mother got sick, I sat with her in waiting rooms for hours so she would not be alone. We were not friends in the casual modern way. We were each other's people, the emergency contact, the one you call first with the good news and the bad. Which is what makes the next part so stupid and so human and so much like something I think a lot of you will recognize from your own lives. But I am getting ahead of myself because I have to tell you how I lost her, and I have to tell it honestly, which means I do not get to be the hero of it. 10 years ago, when we were both 32, Our lives hit a place where they could not fit together gently anymore, and we handled it badly, both of us. Della and her husband had been trying for years to have a baby, and it was not happening, and it was breaking her in a quiet way I did not understand nearly well enough at the time. And in the middle of those years, I got pregnant. Easily, almost carelessly, the kind of thing that just happened for me. And I was so wrapped up in my own joy that I was clumsy with her grief. I told her my news at a dinner, in front of other people, glowing, not thinking, and I watched something close behind her eyes. And instead of getting quiet and gentle the way a better friend would have, I felt hurt that she could not just be happy for me. And later that night, she said something sharp, something about how it must be nice to have everything come so easy, and I said something sharp back, something I will not repeat, something about how she could at least pretend to be glad. And we both went home angry. I have replayed that dinner more times than I can count, and what kills me is how small it was, how completely survivable it should have been. If either of us had been a little less raw that night, it would have been nothing, a friend's clumsy moment, forgiven by morning. But timing is everything in a wound. I caught her on the worst possible night, after the latest round of bad news she had not even told me about yet, and she caught me at my most thoughtlessly happy, and the two of us, who had navigated 30 years of each other's hardest seasons with grace, somehow fumbled this one completely. I have thought a lot about how the closest friendships can break on the smallest things, and I think it is precisely because they are close, because only someone who knows exactly where you are soft can land a blow that deep by accident, and only someone you trusted that much can hurt you enough to make you go silent. Strangers cannot break your heart. Della could, because I had given her 30 years of access to it, and that night, both of us bleeding, we used that access to wound each other instead of to heal. And that was it. That was the whole thing. Not an affair, not a betrayal, not some unforgivable act. Just two women at a painful crossroads, each drowning in her own thing, each needing the other to understand something the other couldn't reach in that moment, and each too hurt to be the first to say, "I'm sorry." The silence started as a few days. Then it was a few weeks, and I had the baby, and in my anger and my postpartum fog, I did not invite her. And that became its own unforgivable thing. And the few weeks became a few months, and somewhere in there, the silence stopped being something either of us was actively doing, and became simply the new shape of the world. Della was gone from my life. And I told myself a story to live with it, the same story she told herself I now know. That she had ended it. That she was the one who couldn't be happy for me, who said the cruel thing, who didn't come to the hospital because she didn't reach out, who clearly didn't want me anymore. The ball, I told myself for 10 years, was in her court. She was telling herself for 10 years that the ball was in mine. And the cruelest trick pride plays is that it gets stronger the longer you obey it. The first week, reaching out would have been easy. A phone call, a sorry, a laugh about how dumb we had both been. But every day I did not call made the next call harder, because now there was more silence to explain, more weeks of absence to account for, a missed hospital visit to apologize for on top of the original fight. The unsaid sorry grows heavier the longer it sits, until picking it up feels impossible, until the gap itself becomes the thing you cannot face. By year 3, I was not avoiding a fight anymore. I was avoiding the sheer enormity of 3 years. By year 8, the silence had its own gravity, a decade of accumulated not reaching that felt far too vast to cross with anything as small as a phone call. That is how you end up here, at 42, having lost your oldest friend not in a single dramatic break, but in 10,000 small daily decisions to let the wall stand one more day. Pride does not ask you for one big sacrifice. It asks you for a tiny one every day and collects them quietly until they add up to a life. That is the thing about pride, and I have had a great deal of time to think about it now. Pride does not feel like pride from the inside. It feels like dignity. It feels like self-respect, like having standards, like not being a doormat. Every single year of that silence, some part of me would think of Della. I thought of her constantly, honestly. She was stitched into 30 years of my memories. I could not photograph a wedding without some echo of her, And every single time, pride would whisper the same thing. She hurt you, she left. If she wanted you back, she knows where you are. And I would feel, for a moment, righteous instead of heartbroken, and the righteousness was just comfortable enough to keep me from picking up the phone. For 10 years. 10 years of two women who loved each other living 40 minutes apart, both waiting for the other one to go first, both calling their cowardice dignity. I want you to understand what a decade of that costs, because it is not nothing. It is not just an absence. It is all the things that did not happen. My daughter grew up without the woman who should have been her aunt. Della never met her. There were hard nights in my marriage when the one person I would have called was the one person I had decided I couldn't. There were good things, funny things, 1,000 tiny moments a day that I would have shared with Della and instead just let pass, because the person I shared everything with for 30 years was on the other side of a wall I was too proud to climb. You do not lose a friendship like that all at once. You lose it again, in a small way, every single day for 10 years. There was one time I almost broke. About 5 years in, I saw her across a farmer's market downtown, just for a second, holding a paper bag of tomatoes, laughing at something her husband said, and my whole body turned toward her before my pride could stop it. I took one step. And then the old story rose up. She said the cruel thing. She didn't come to the hospital. Let her come to you. And I turned and walked the other way. And I told myself I felt strong. And I did not feel strong. I felt sick the whole drive home. I have thought about that tomato afternoon so many times since. How close I came. How I could have just crossed a farmer's market and saved us 5 more years. That is the thing nobody warns you about pride. It never feels like the moment you lose someone. It just feels like one more ordinary day of being right, and the days pile up into years before you understand that the being right was the losing, the entire time. And then, last spring, I opened my mailbox, and there was her half of the sand dollar. There was no note. She did not need one. That was the whole genius and the whole heartbreak of it. That after 10 years of silence, she could send me a broken piece of shell with no words at all, and I would understand the entire message. Because that is what it is to have known someone since you were 6. The message was, I'm still your other half. The message was, I'm letting go of the pride. I'm reaching first. I'm sorry, are you still there? And the message was, unmistakably, because Della would never have surrendered her half of that vow for anything less. I am running out of time. I sat down on my front steps with both halves in my hand. I had run inside and gotten mine, and I fit them together, and they still matched. After 34 years, the broken edges still knew each other, and I cried like I had not let myself cry in a decade, because I understood that my best friend was dying somewhere 40 minutes away, and that even now, even sick, even with every reason to let me come crawling, she had been the brave one. She had been the bold one, exactly like she was on that beach when we were 8. She reached first. After 10 years where I had told myself it was her turn, she reached first anyway, because she was the better friend, and had always been, and was not going to let pride win, even with the clock running out. I sat on those steps a long time before I could even dial, the two halves pressed together in my shaking hand. 40 minutes. That was the entire distance I had treated as uncrossable for 10 years. 40 minutes of 2-lane road and 1 bridge over the marsh. I had driven farther than that for a wedding I did not care about. I had driven farther than that to photograph strangers promising each other forever, while the one person who had promised me forever on a beach when we were 8 sat 40 minutes away, believing I had stopped loving her. The smallness of the distance, set against the size of what it had cost, is a thing I will never quite get over. The wall I could not climb for a decade turned out to be 40 minutes and 1 act of courage I could have performed on any day of those 10 years, and simply, repeatedly, chose not to. I called the number I had never deleted. She answered on the second ring, and her voice was thinner than I remembered, and she said, "June?" Just my name, a question and an apology, and 10 years all folded into 1 syllable, and I said, I'm coming right now, don't you dare go anywhere." And I drove those 40 minutes I had refused to drive for a decade, and I walked into her house, and we looked at each other. She was so thin, the cancer had been at work a long time, and neither of us said sorry, because we did not need to, because the sand dollar had already said it. We just held on to each other and shook. We had 4 months. That is what we got in the end for our 30 years of friendship and our 10 years of waste. 4 months. And I am not going to lie to you and say it was enough, because it was not. It was a cruel fraction of what we threw away. But I will tell you that we used it. I was there nearly every day. We talked through everything, the whole 10 years, all of it. I learned that she had picked up the phone to call me 100 times and put it down, that she had driven past my studio, that she had a folder on her computer of photos of my work she had quietly followed all those years, proud of me from behind the wall. I learned that the cruelty I had assigned her, the not reaching, had been the exact mirror of my own. We forgave each other for the dinner, for the hospital, for the decade, and the forgiving took about an afternoon, because it turned out there had never really been anything to forgive except our shared, stubborn, ordinary human pride. In those 4 months I photographed her, finally. I had not taken her picture in a decade, and I am a woman who makes her living stopping time, and I had let 10 years of her face go unrecorded. So, I made up for it the only way I could. I took hundreds of pictures, her hands, her laugh, the light on the bad days and the good ones. And I am so glad I did, because they are all I have of her now in the present tense. We did the small things too, the things we used to do. I drove her out to Hunting Island one afternoon when she was strong enough, and we sat on the same beach where we found the sand dollar 34 years before. 2 middle-aged women, one of us dying, holding hands and not saying much, watching the water do what it has always done. She told me that day that the 4 months were better than the 10 years would have been if we had just kept drifting politely along. I do not know if that is true, but it was like Della to find the brave, generous way to look at the thing, right to the very end. She was always the bold one. She reached first on the beach, and she reached first in the mailbox, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be the kind of friend who learned, even this late, to reach back. She died in the autumn, with me holding one of her hands and her husband holding the other. I put my half of the sand dollar in her hands at the end, so she would have the whole one, finally, and I kept hers. I have it on my dresser now, where mine used to be. The other half came home. If you have a Della, and most of us have a Della, someone you loved like your own breath and lost to a fight that pride made permanent, then this story is for you. One word in the comments if it found you. Half. Just that. It is for the person who was your other half, the one you have been waiting 10 years for, telling yourself the ball is in their court. Maybe it is. Reach anyway. Subscribe for new stories, real patterns, full narratives, the long game. 2 small pieces of wisdom from this one before I go. The first, when a friendship breaks, you will tell yourself a story about whose fault it was and whose turn it is to reach out. And that story will almost always end with the conclusion that you are owed the first move. Be very suspicious of that conclusion, because the other person is, at this very moment, sitting on their side of the silence, telling themselves the exact same story with the roles reversed. That is how good friendships die over nothing. Not because the love ran out, but because 2 proud people each spent years waiting for the other to do the one brave thing. Do not wait to find out who was right. It does not matter who was right. The friendship is worth more than the verdict. Be the one who reaches first, and reach now, while reaching still does some good. The second, we dress our pride up in respectable clothes. We call it dignity, self-respect, having boundaries. And sometimes it really is those things, but very often it is just fear wearing a nicer outfit, the fear of being the one who cared more, the one who reached and got left hanging. I let that fear cost me 10 years with the person who knew me best in the world, and I got 4 months back by sheer mercy. 4 months I could have had as 10 years if either of us had been brave a decade sooner. So I am begging you, do not gamble that you will get the mercy I got. Most people don't. The sand dollar does not always come in the mail in time. If there is half of you walking around in someone else's life, Go and find it, today, before the only way left to reach them is too late. Pride will tell you to wait until the other person reaches first, and it will happily let you wait until it is too late. So be the one who reaches. The friendship you save may be the half of yourself you forgot was missing. I'll see you next time.